it's Lauren with the Beadbox Bargains, and today we are going to take a look at some of the ways to use Coreana chain, which is a newer product we have in on our website, beadboxbargains.com, and we've had just a couple questions about some of the best ways to finish it off and some of its uses, so I thought we would demonstrate with a quick little project. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, so just to go over what's I used for today's project, we have Wire 603, the gold Coreana chain from beadboxbargains.com. We have the magnet clasp from January's bargain bead box. I've just taken the little moon and star charms off to save for another project. We have some crimp beads. These are Find 1105, and they are a small brass crimp bead. I like to use like a 2mm by 1.2mm, something in that ballpark. You don't need it very big. This is, I believe, 0.8mm Coreana chain, and your crimp bead doesn't have to be a lot bigger than that. And then we've got the cubic zirconia and gold-plated brass charm from the February bargain bead box. We've got Space 1416 from Beadbox Bargains. And these are just your little round spacer beads. I really like this size for the Coreana chain. And then we've got two of Find 2134 clamshell bead tips just to finish it off. All right, so to start with, Coreana chain is pretty easy to cut. And unlike a lot of stringing materials, because you can finish it right at the end, you don't need to cut a lot of extra to work with. So you can cut it pretty much how long you want your necklace to be. I'm going to go around 18 inches, and you may be the kind of person who measures that, and I commend you. I am an eyeballer, so that looks right to me. And the Coreana chain cuts really smoothly. It's not hard to work with. It's a little bit almost like buttery, which sounds silly, but if you cut it, you know what I mean. And you can bead right onto it, and you can crimp right onto it. So we're going to make like an illusion style necklace right on this chain. So I'm going to start with the middle. I'm going to put a crimp bead on, and then I'm going to do 3 of my little spacer beads over here. 1, 2, and third one. And then I'm going to put on my little charm in the middle. And this is a very simple design. I'm really just trying to show you the basics of how to work with it. You can dress it up or down and do whatever you want. This is going to be just a very simple pendant. It really shows off that dainty, colorful cubic zirconia there, which is kind of fun. So now I'm doing 3 more spacer beads on the other side of the jump ring. And I'm going to string on 1 more crimp bead at the end. You can also, when you're working with Coreana chain, you can absolutely use crimp, like the crimp bead or knot covers, to cover up your crimps if you prefer. I personally, if I'm doing dainty beads like these, I tend to just use crimping and shaping pliers in a little 2-step process. I'll show you here. So you've got your interior crimping bit that's closest to the jaw there, and then the one on the end is for shaping. So we're going to crimp a crimp bead, and now we're going to kind of fold it in half with the shaping bit. Just kind of get it a little bit rounder. And I am not going to pretend to be the world's most skilled person at this, so you may do much better than me. All right. Okay, so now that's going to stay put. Now we're going to crimp the other side. And because you want your necklace to have a little bit of bend to it, you want to be careful that you don't crimp it so tightly that it all just bunches up. But you also don't want it to move around too much. You want to have some like natural play in it, if that makes any sense at all. So I usually try to leave just like a teensy tiny little bit of space. And yeah, that looks pretty good. I think that's going to work out. And now again, I'm going to come around here, and I'm going to try to push it here into a round. A little bit of a round there. All right. And like I said, again, you could hide your crimp beads if you wanted to with a little crimp cover here, but they look all right. I'm going to leave them. Okay. So now I'm going to make a little accent on each side. I'm going to do 2 sets of 3 spacers partway up the chain. You can put them as close or as far apart as you want. It just helps to keep them symmetrical unless you're making an asymmetric piece, which is definitely an option as well. I'm going to go ahead and string on a crimp bead and then 3 more of my spacers. All right, and then 1 more crimp, and I'm going to do the same thing on the other side just to kind of get it ready and help me line up my design here. All right, so crimp bead, 3 spacers, and then 1 more crimp afterwards. And one nice thing about these little spacers is if you're working with larger hole beads on this Coreana chain, and a crimp bead is not going to be enough to keep your bead in place, you can throw a little spacer in there too, and it'll just kind of help hold things. All right, so now we're going to crimp again. So line them up, figure out where you want it. And you can measure it, again, if you're a measuring person, which I probably should be, but am not. I like it about right there. So I'm just gonna hold this crimp bead right here. And I'm gonna go for it. I'm gonna squash it with the interior plier here. And then I'm gonna kind of just fold those C-shaped edges onto each other with the front bit. There we go, so it comes out a little bit more rounded and smaller. Okay, now I'm gonna repeat that process at the end of this. So first of all, we're gonna squash it with the interior of the crimping plier, which kind of folds it into a bent C shape, and we're gonna try to close that C shape with the front of the crimping plier into more of a rounded bead. And it may never be quite exactly perfect, and that's okay. If it really bothers you, again, you can absolutely hide it with a crimp cover, but I don't see any sharp edges, and that's the only thing I'm ever super concerned about. Okay, so now the tricky part, and the part where, again, measuring can help you, but I'm just gonna go for it, is lining up on the other side. This looks pretty good. So I'm gonna try to hold this really tight and use the other as a reference while I'm crimping. Okay, that looks pretty good. Okay, so I'm gonna grab it and slide it back to there. Okay, see how I did? Yeah, it looks all right. And now we will shape that crimp bead a little bit. And then doing the last one is a lot easier than the top one. Again, you don't want to buckle your beads up on top of each other. Just want to leave that tiniest little bit of space. Okay, here we go. Inside and then the outside. All right, so now you have sort of like 2 floating segments there, and you can repeat these as much as you want up your chain. I'm going to do it 1 more time, I think, for my pattern. And the Coreana chain is just, it's super fun to work with because it saves you all the trouble of looping in between chains, of adding links. It's just something a little bit different. I've made several Coreana chain pieces since we got ours in, just because it's not something I played around with that much before, and I'm having a lot of fun with it. So here we go. All right, I'm gonna do the same thing here. Kind of tried it this time, instead of working off the other strand, I'm gonna try to kind of leave about the same amount of distance between these as I left in my first set. So that looks pretty good to me. I'm gonna mark where I want the bead, and we'll go ahead and crimp it here. Here we go. All right, and now we just gotta crimp the one at the end. All right, and then shape it a little bit. Okay. All right, the last thing I'm gonna do for this pattern is repeat this on this strand. So I'll do that real fast, and then we'll get ready to add the clasp. And there are several ways you can finish off Coreana chain. You can use a crimp-on or glue-on cord tip if you like. I am honestly a little afraid of the glue-on ones. I can never seem to get my glue ratio quite correct. I either overdo it and I have little globs of glue, or I am scared, don't put enough on, and it falls off later. So it definitely can be done. I find it easier, and if you've seen my other tutorials, this will not surprise you at all. I find it easier to use the clamshell bead tips personally. All right, so again, gonna try to line this up, and all right, and then I usually just use my fingernails to point to exactly where I want it to be, and that'll help me while I'm crimping. I did not form that one very well. Look at him, he's kind of diagonal. My bad. All right. Magnet clasp is coming in a little early there. Gotta wait your turn. All right. One last crimp here, and then it'll be time to think about getting that clasp on. Now you can absolutely just go ahead and do your clamshell bead tip and then a crimp bead. I like to have a little bit of a pattern leading up to it, especially to kind of go along with what we have going on here. It also, I find, gives you a little bit of texture that makes it easier to put your magnet clasp on and off. So I'm going to start by doing a crimp bead. Then I'm going to do 2 more spacers. And then finally, we'll do our clamshell and then one last crimp bead. This is just a stylistic choice. It's how I like to end these things. You can do whatever you would like. All right. And I have used crimp-on tips too before that I liked. I'm just don't have them available right now, and personally I think this is simpler, so this is what we're gonna do. I'm gonna start by getting this crimp like right up onto the end. All right, we got that crimp squeezed. We're gonna shape it a little bit, although it matters much less because it is just about to be hidden by our bead tip here. I'm gonna squeeze that shut over it, and I'm going to use my pliers gently to make sure that those loops are lined up as much as possible. You give it a gentle squeeze, not too hard, because you don't want to dent it. Okay, so now I'm going to come over here. I'm going to put my clasp on it. I'm just going to close this jump ring. And when you're working with magnetic clasps, they will try to jump onto your pliers. Okay, there we go. So now what we have to do for this end is to bring up those spacers in the crimp bead, and we're going to crimp that bead too. And again, this just kind of creates a nice little, less abrupt ending, I guess. It's a little decorative. It's a little practical because it gives you something to hold on to close that clasp a little more easily. All right, so I'm going to squish this crimp. Very carefully shape this crimp a little bit. All right, happy with that? We're just going to do the same thing here on the other side. So crimp bead, followed by 2 more spacers. And then we're going to throw on our last clamshell bead tip and one last crimp bead, and we'll be all done stringing. Here we go. All right, and now we're just going to repeat that same process and crimp this bead close to the end. There we go. Form it down a tiny little bit. Again, I'm not going to mess with it, worry about making it pretty because it's going to be hidden anyway. line up those loops. Squeeze it a little gently. Here we go. And now all that's left to do is slip that on this jump ring and close the jump ring. I'm gonna grab onto the end with the magnet clasp because I know it's gonna try to jump away. Here we go. And then we're going to close this up. There we go. All right. And that's all there is to it. Well, almost. After we do this last crimp bead, but that's all there is to like attaching it. I love to use the clamshells. They're quick, they're easy, they get it done. And they are also, I feel like they look really professional. There you go. We're all done. You've got that nice little bit to hold on to while you pull the magnet apart. You've got your whole pattern complete here. And you've just got some delicate accent, floating accent beads to go with the triple cubic zirconia design. That's why I went with little groups of 3. And you can do so many things with Coreana chain. I mean, the design opportunities are limitless. Here's another quick one that I made using February's beads. You've got the crystals and rose quartz from the box paired with a lampwork glass bead from the Beadbox Bargain store that I put on the head pin there and attached with a bail bead. So again, just some quick ideas for Coreana chain. I would love to see what you make with it. And if you have any other questions or any other tutorials you'd like to see, please let us know in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. Please feel free to like and subscribe. And yeah, thanks for being here. Happy beading.